The moment my mother remembered a song she had forgotten for 10 years, I knew this waitress was hiding something. Leonardo Moretti would later tell his board of directors that it was the most important discovery of his life. But on that evening, he was simply standing frozen beside a table in the corner of a crowded Italian restaurant in Manhattan, staring at a young black waitress who should not have known what she knew. The restaurant hummed with the soft clinking of glasses and quiet conversations. Warm amber lights reflected against polished wood. The smell of fresh bread and garlic drifted through the air. It was the kind of place where wealthy executives closed million-dollar deals over dinner. Leonardo owned half the building. People usually noticed him the second he walked through the door. Tonight, nobody noticed him at all, because everyone was watching his mother. Rosa Moretti sat near the window, her silver hair glowing beneath the hanging lights. At 78 years old, she had once been the heart of the Moretti family. Strong, elegant, fiercely intelligent. But time had slowly stolen pieces of her memory. Some days she recognized her son. Some days she didn't. The doctors called it cognitive decline. The specialists offered treatments, therapies, expensive programs. Leonardo had spent more money than most people earned in a lifetime trying to help her. Yet every month, another piece of her seemed to disappear. Tonight had started no differently. Rosa had barely spoken during dinner. She stared quietly at the tablecloth while Leonardo answered emails between courses. Then he heard it. A voice. Soft, warm, unexpected. Buonasera, signora Rosa. Leonardo looked up immediately. The speaker was Naomi Carter, one of the waitresses. She stood beside his mother holding a basket of bread. Her black uniform was simple, her expression calm. There was nothing about her appearance that prepared him for what came next. Rosa blinked, slowly lifted her head, and answered in Italian. Not modern Italian. Not the polished version taught in universities. This was something older, something regional, something from a small Sicilian village that barely existed anymore. Naomi replied without hesitation. The words flowed naturally, effortlessly, like she had spoken them her entire life. Leonardo stared. Even some members of his own family couldn't understand that dialect anymore. Yet this waitress spoke it perfectly. Rosa's eyes brightened. For the first time all evening, she smiled. Then she laughed. A real laugh. Not polite. Not forced. Genuine. The sound stopped Leonardo's heartbeat for a moment. He had not heard that laugh in months. Around them, conversations slowly faded. Other diners began glancing toward the table. Nobody understood what the two women were saying, but they could see something unusual happening. Naomi leaned closer and said something that made Rosa place a trembling hand over her heart. Tears appeared in the older woman's eyes. Not tears of sadness. Recognition. Memory. Something long forgotten was returning. Leonardo took a slow step forward. Then another. The room suddenly felt smaller. His pulse quickened. Because Rosa had just begun reciting an old childhood rhyme she hadn't remembered in over a decade. And somehow, Naomi already knew every single word before she said it. Leonardo could not move. He stood beside the table listening as his mother continued the rhyme, her voice growing stronger with every line. Naomi answered gently, matching the rhythm perfectly. The words sounded simple, almost musical, but to Leonardo they felt impossible. Rosa had not spoken that rhyme since he was a child. In fact, he had forgotten it himself. Yet somehow this waitress knew every verse. Around them, the restaurant seemed to fade away. The clinking glasses, the conversations, the background music all became distant. Rosa smiled at Naomi the way she used to smile at old friends back in Sicily. It was a smile Leonardo had spent years trying to bring back. Expensive specialists had promised progress. Therapists had promised hope. None of them had managed what this young woman accomplished in less than 10 minutes. Naomi never appeared surprised by the reaction. She simply listened, asked gentle questions, let Rosa speak at her own pace. There was something unusual about the way she communicated. She never rushed, never corrected, never interrupted. Instead, she gave Rosa space to find her own memories. And somehow those memories kept appearing, one after another, like lights turning back on inside a dark house. Rosa suddenly laughed again. Then she mentioned the name of a neighbor from her childhood village. Leonardo blinked in disbelief. He had not heard that name in more than 30 years. A moment later, Rosa described a tiny bakery near the church where she used to buy bread as a little girl. The details were vivid, specific, real. Naomi nodded warmly, as if she understood every reference, as if she had walked those same streets herself. Leonardo finally stepped closer. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Naomi looked up. Her dark eyes were calm, professional, respectful. "Yes, Mr. Moretti? Where did you learn that dialect?" For the first time, Naomi hesitated. Only for a second. Then she smiled softly. "From my grandmother." Leonardo frowned. "Your grandmother was Sicilian?" "Very much so." Rosa suddenly reached for Naomi's hand. "Not many young people remember our words anymore," she said in Italian. "Most forget." Naomi squeezed her hand gently. "Some things are worth remembering." The older woman looked emotional. Leonardo saw tears gathering in her eyes again. But this time they were accompanied by something he had almost forgotten existed. Joy. Genuine joy. A server approached to ask Naomi about another table waiting for assistance. She apologized politely and promised she would return in a moment. Before leaving, she leaned toward Rosa and whispered something in Sicilian. Rosa's eyes widened. Then she laughed harder than before. Naomi walked away carrying a tray toward the kitchen. Leonardo watched her disappear through the swinging doors. His mother turned toward him immediately. "Leonardo," she said, "you must find that girl's family." He stared. "Why?" Rosa looked toward the kitchen entrance, her expression suddenly serious. "Because I know that face," she whispered. "And if I am right, her grandmother once changed my life." Leonardo sat down slowly, but his mind refused to settle. His mother rarely spoke with such certainty anymore. Most days her memories drifted like fog across a harbor, appearing for a moment before disappearing again. Yet now there had been no hesitation in her voice. She truly believed she recognized something about Naomi. Rosa continued staring toward the kitchen doors as if she expected the young waitress to return at any second. "Mama," Leonardo said gently, "what do you mean she changed your life?" Rosa smiled faintly. "I am not sure yet." The answer frustrated him. Years ago, he would have pressed harder, demanded details, requested facts. But experience had taught him patience. Memory worked differently now. Pushing too hard only caused the moments to vanish. So he waited. A few minutes later, Naomi returned carrying fresh tea. Her movements were graceful and efficient. She set the cup down carefully in front of Rosa. "Chamomile," she said softly. "Just the way you like it." Rosa looked delighted. "You remembered." Naomi smiled. "Of course." Leonardo noticed something unusual. Most employees treated wealthy customers with rehearsed professionalism. Naomi treated people as if they mattered regardless of their status. There was warmth in her attention, a sincerity that could not be trained. As she turned to leave, Rosa touched her sleeve. "Tell me about your grandmother." Naomi paused. For a brief moment, something emotional crossed her face. "Her name was Isabella Carter," she said quietly. Rosa's eyes widened. The reaction was immediate, so immediate that Leonardo leaned forward in his chair. "Isabella?" Rosa whispered. Naomi nodded. "You knew her?" Rosa slowly covered her mouth. Tears gathered again. "Known her?" she said. "She was my best friend when I was a little girl." Naomi froze. The tray nearly slipped from her hands. "That is impossible. We lived 3 houses apart," Rosa continued. "A tiny village near Palermo. We walked to school together every morning." Naomi stared in disbelief. "My grandmother was from a village near Palermo." Neither woman spoke for several seconds. The restaurant continued around them, unaware that 2 family histories had just collided after more than half a century apart. Leonardo watched the exchange carefully. For the first time all evening, Naomi looked shaken. Not frightened, just overwhelmed. My grandmother passed away 6 years ago, she said softly. Rosa squeezed her hand. Then heaven has a beautiful new storyteller. Naomi smiled through misty eyes. Leonardo felt something shift inside him. He had spent most of his life evaluating people quickly. Investors, executives, partners, competitors. He could usually determine someone's value within minutes. Yet this young woman continued surprising him. First the language, then the memories. Now this impossible connection to his mother's past. It felt less like coincidence and more like a thread being pulled through time. As Naomi excused herself to help another table, Rosa leaned closer to her son. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Leonardo, there is something she does not know. He frowned. What? Rosa looked toward the kitchen one more time. The last time I saw Isabella Carter, she gave me something to keep safe. Leonardo's heartbeat quickened. What was it? Rosa's eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. I cannot remember, she admitted. But I know it belonged to her family. And somehow, I think it was meant for Naomi. Leonardo spent the rest of the evening pretending to focus on dinner, but his attention never left the mystery his mother had uncovered. A forgotten promise, a missing memory, and somehow Naomi Carter stood at the center of it all. The restaurant slowly emptied as the night grew later. Rain tapped softly against the windows facing the street. The golden lights reflected across the wet pavement outside. Inside, Naomi continued working as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She greeted guests, cleared tables, and refilled glasses with the same quiet professionalism she had shown all evening. Yet every time Rosa looked at her, a spark of recognition appeared in her eyes. It was as if a door long locked inside her memory had begun to open. Near closing time, Leonardo helped his mother into her coat. Rosa moved more slowly than she once had, but there was unusual energy in her face. She seemed lighter, more present. Before leaving, she asked Naomi to sit with them for a moment. Naomi glanced toward her manager, received a nod of approval, and joined them. I have been trying to remember all night, Rosa said softly. Something Isabella asked me to protect. Naomi listened carefully. Did she ever tell you what it was? Rosa closed her eyes. The lines on her face tightened with concentration. Several long seconds passed. Then she shook her head. Not yet. Disappointment flickered across Naomi's expression before she quickly hid it. That is okay, she said gently. Memories come when they are ready. Rosa smiled. You sound exactly like your grandmother. The comment seemed to affect Naomi deeply. Leonardo noticed her eyes lower toward the table. She raised me, Naomi admitted. Most of what I know came from her. Including Sicilian? Rosa asked. Naomi nodded. Every Sunday morning, she made me practice for hours. Rosa laughed. That sounds like Isabella. For a moment the three of them shared an unexpected silence. Comfortable, warm, familiar. Then Rosa suddenly opened her eyes. The chest. Leonardo looked up immediately. What chest? Rosa pointed toward the ceiling as if searching through the rooms of an old house only she could see. There was a wooden chest. Her voice became stronger. Blue paint, iron corners. Isabella gave me something before my family left Sicily. She told me never to throw it away. Naomi leaned forward. Do you know where it is? Rosa's breathing quickened. I think so. Leonardo felt his pulse rise. This was the first concrete detail all evening. The first real clue. Mama, are you sure? Rosa nodded slowly. Your grandfather brought it to America. I remember seeing it in our old house when you were little. Leonardo stared. He knew exactly which house she meant. The original Moretti family home in New Jersey. Empty for years. Preserved mostly for sentimental reasons. A place filled with forgotten furniture and boxes nobody had opened in decades. Rosa looked directly at him. Tomorrow, she whispered, take Naomi there. I think Isabella left something waiting all these years. The next morning arrived with clear skies and cool autumn air. For most people it was an ordinary Tuesday. For Leonardo Moretti, it felt like the beginning of a question that had waited 50 years to be answered. At 9 o'clock sharp, a black sedan pulled up outside the restaurant where Naomi worked. She stepped onto the sidewalk carrying a small canvas bag and a nervous smile. Part of her still could not believe she had agreed to this. The entire situation felt unreal. A billionaire, his mother, a forgotten friendship from Sicily, and now a trip to a house she had never seen, searching for something nobody could even describe. Leonardo stepped out of the car. Unlike the previous evening, he was not wearing an expensive suit. Instead, he wore a simple navy sweater and dark jeans. Somehow he looked less intimidating, more human. "Thank you for coming," he said. Naomi nodded. "Honestly, I almost did not." A faint smile crossed his face. "I almost canceled." That surprised her. "Why?" Leonardo opened the passenger door. "Because I do not like mysteries I cannot control." Naomi laughed softly. "Then today might be difficult." The drive took nearly an hour. As Manhattan disappeared behind them, the landscape slowly changed. Busy streets gave way to quiet neighborhoods lined with old trees painted in shades of gold and amber. Neither spoke much at first. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Eventually, Leonardo glanced toward her. "You really learned all of that from your grandmother?" Naomi looked out the window. "Most of it. The language. The stories. The songs." Her expression softened. She believed people carried pieces of history inside them. Leonardo thought about that for a moment. "My mother says things like that." Naomi smiled. "Then they probably would have gotten along." The car finally turned onto a narrow road surrounded by tall oak trees. At the end stood an old stone house. Time had weathered its walls. Ivy climbed across parts of the exterior. The windows reflected the morning sunlight like polished glass. Naomi stared. "Your family lived here?" Leonardo nodded. "My grandparents bought it after arriving from Sicily." They stepped out of the car. The property was quiet except for the distant sound of birds. Leonardo unlocked the front door. A faint scent of cedar and old books greeted them. Dust danced through beams of sunlight stretching across the wooden floors. Everything felt frozen in time. Family photographs still hung on the walls. Shelves remained filled with objects nobody had touched in years. Naomi walked slowly through the hallway. She could almost feel generations lingering in the rooms. Then Leonardo stopped. The attic. Together they climbed a narrow staircase. The air grew cooler. Shadows filled the corners. Dozens of boxes sat beneath the sloped ceiling. Old furniture stood covered by white sheets. For several minutes they searched quietly. Then Naomi froze. Across the room, partly hidden behind a wooden trunk, sat a faded blue chest reinforced with iron corners. Exactly as Rosa had described. Neither spoke. Leonardo slowly approached it. The paint was chipped, the metal worn with age. Yet one detail remained perfectly visible. Carved into the lid was a single word. Carter. Naomi stopped breathing for a moment. The carved name seemed impossible. Carter. Her family name. Her grandmother's family name. A name that had traveled across an ocean and survived generations. Yet here it was, etched into a chest hidden inside a house that belonged to the Moretti family. Leonardo looked at her. "You see it too, right?" Naomi nodded slowly. "This cannot be a coincidence." Dust floated through the sunlight as they approached the chest together. The metal latch was old but intact. Leonardo knelt beside it and carefully brushed away years of dust. His fingers hesitated over the lock. For some reason, opening it suddenly felt important. Not because of money, not because of history, because whatever rested inside had been waiting for someone. Perhaps for decades, perhaps for half a century. Naomi lowered herself beside him. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Memories of her grandmother filled her mind. Long Sunday mornings, Italian songs drifting through a small apartment kitchen. Stories about Sicily, stories about friendship, stories that had always sounded like fairy tales from another world. Leonardo gently lifted the latch. A soft click echoed through the attic. Then he slowly raised the lid. The hinges creaked. Inside sat several carefully wrapped bundles protected by faded linen cloth. Everything had been arranged with remarkable care, as if the person who packed it expected someone important to open it one day. Naomi reached inside first. Her hands trembled slightly. Beneath the cloth she found old photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white images frozen in time. Children standing beside stone houses. Families gathered around long wooden tables. Village festivals beneath strings of lights. Then she saw them. 2 young girls standing arm in arm. One was Rosa. The other could only be Isabella. Even as children their smiles were unmistakable. Naomi stared at the photograph. Tears filled her eyes before she realized it. "That is her," she whispered. "That is my grandmother." Leonardo looked over her shoulder. "And my mother." For a long moment neither spoke. Then Leonardo noticed another item beneath the photographs. A leather journal tied with a blue ribbon. The cover was worn from age but beautifully preserved. Naomi carefully opened it. On the first page, written in elegant Italian handwriting, was a dedication. "To my dearest friend Rosa. If life ever separates our families, promise me our stories will never disappear." Naomi swallowed hard. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her grandmother had written birthday cards in the exact same style. Page after page contained memories, childhood adventures, recipes, songs, dreams about the future. Some pages included sketches of village streets and family homes. Others described promises made between 2 young girls who believed friendship could last forever. Then something slipped from between the pages. A folded envelope, yellowed with age, sealed. On the front was a single name written in careful script. Isabella had addressed it not to Rosa, not to the Moretti family, not to anyone from Sicily. The envelope simply read, "For the first Carter girl who finds her way back home." Naomi stared at the envelope as if it might disappear the moment she touched it. The attic suddenly felt very quiet. Even the distant sounds from outside seemed to fade away. For years she had listened to her grandmother's stories about friendship, loyalty, and promises that survived oceans. Yet never once had Isabella mentioned a letter. Never once had she hinted that something like this existed. Leonardo watched as Naomi carefully turned the envelope over in her hands. The paper was fragile with age but remarkably well preserved. Whoever had protected it had done so with extraordinary care. "You should open it," Leonardo said softly. Naomi nodded, but for several seconds she could not move. There was something emotional about seeing her family name written by her grandmother decades before she was born. It felt less like finding an object and more like hearing a voice from another lifetime. Finally, she broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter written in elegant blue ink. Naomi unfolded it slowly. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "What does it say?" Leonardo asked. Naomi swallowed hard before reading aloud. "To the first Carter girl who finds her way back home. If you are reading this, then life has completed a journey neither Rosa nor I could finish ourselves." The attic seemed to hold its breath. Naomi continued, "Our families may be separated by years, distance, and circumstance, but never by love. Remember this. You do not inherit wealth because it can disappear. You do not inherit titles because they can be forgotten. You inherit stories. You inherit kindness. You inherit the responsibility to leave people better than you found them." Leonardo lowered his eyes. The words felt simple yet powerful. Naomi kept reading. "One day the world may convince you that your worth depends on what you own, where you work, or what others think of you. Do not believe it. True value lives in character. If you have compassion, curiosity, and courage, then you already possess everything that matters." Naomi paused. Her voice trembled. The message sounded exactly like the lessons her grandmother had taught throughout her childhood. Then she reached the final paragraph. Her expression changed. "There is more." Leonardo stepped closer. Naomi read carefully. "Rosa and I made a promise as little girls. If either family ever lost its way, the other would help guide them home. If you are reading, This beside a member of the Moretti family. Then our promise has survived longer than we ever imagined. Neither spoke. The coincidence was almost impossible to comprehend. Naomi looked toward the old photographs scattered across the floor. Two young girls smiling beside each other. Two friends who believed their bond would outlive time itself. Somehow they had been right. Then something slipped from the back of the envelope and landed gently on the wooden floor. Both of them looked down. It was a small folded document. Much older than the letter. Much older than the photographs. Naomi carefully opened it. Her eyes widened. Across the top was a handwritten family record from Sicily. Beneath it were two names connected by a single line. One was Isabella Carter. The other was Rosa Moretti. And beside both names was a note that changed everything they thought they knew about their families. Naomi read the note 3 times before she trusted her own eyes. The handwriting was faded but still clear. Beneath the names of Isabella Carter and Rosa Moretti, someone had written a single sentence. Sisters of the Heart, bound by promise, witnessed before the village council of San Lucido, spring of 1962. Leonardo frowned. Sisters of the Heart? Naomi looked up. I have never heard of that. Carefully, she continued reading the document. What followed was not a legal contract. It was something older, more personal. A tradition from their village. Two families had formally pledged friendship across generations. They promised to support one another through hardship, celebrate each other's successes, and preserve the stories of those who came before them. Naomi sat back against an old trunk. My grandmother never told me any of this. Leonardo stared at the paper. Neither did my mother. Yet somehow neither felt surprised. The deeper they searched, the more it became clear that Isabella and Rosa had shared a bond far greater than ordinary friendship. Naomi turned the page and discovered another note attached behind it. This one had been written much later. The ink was darker, the handwriting older. It belonged to Isabella herself. Her heart began racing as she read. Rosa, if you are reading this, then time has moved faster than we ever wanted. I know you will keep your promise because you always do. One day our grandchildren may meet. If they do, remind them that success is not measured by what people own. It is measured by what they preserve. Languages disappear. Stories disappear. Memories disappear. Protect them. Leonardo felt a chill run through him. The words sounded almost prophetic. Everything that had happened since Naomi entered the restaurant suddenly seemed connected by an invisible thread. The language, the songs, the memories returning to Rosa. None of it had happened by accident. Naomi gently folded the letter. Her eyes moved across the attic filled with forgotten objects. She spent her whole life protecting these stories, she whispered. Even after leaving Sicily. Leonardo nodded slowly. Then his gaze landed on the bottom of the chest. Something else remained hidden beneath the photographs and journals. A small wooden box no larger than a jewelry case. Unlike everything else, it was locked. Naomi carefully lifted it out. A brass plate on the lid carried a simple inscription. For the day the promise is fulfilled. Neither spoke. The air felt heavier now. More significant. Leonardo turned the box over in his hands. There was no key inside the chest. No explanation. No instructions. Just the box itself waiting patiently after decades of silence. Then Naomi noticed something carved into the side. A symbol. A tiny olive branch. The same symbol she had seen hundreds of times growing up. It was engraved on an old necklace her grandmother had worn every day of her life. Naomi's eyes widened. I know where the key is. Leonardo looked at her in surprise. You do. She nodded slowly. And if I am right, it has been sitting in my apartment this entire time. That afternoon they drove back to Naomi's apartment. The entire journey felt unreal. A hidden chest. Letters from Sicily. Promise preserved for generations. And now a locked box waiting for a key that might have been hiding in plain sight all along. Naomi entered her apartment and walked directly to a bookshelf near the window. On the top shelf sat a small wooden jewelry case that had belonged to her grandmother. She opened it carefully. Inside rested a silver necklace with a tiny olive branch pendant. She had seen it her entire life. Isabella never removed it, not even once. Naomi turned the pendant over. For the first time, she noticed a nearly invisible seam running along the edge. Her fingers trembled as she pressed gently. A tiny compartment opened. Leonardo stared in disbelief. Inside was a delicate brass key. Neither spoke. Minutes later, they were back in the attic. Sunlight stretched across the floorboards as Naomi knelt beside the wooden box. The key slid into the lock perfectly. One soft turn. One quiet click. The lid opened. Inside was no treasure.
No fortune.
No secret inheritance. Instead, there was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed two elderly women sitting beneath an olive tree in Sicily. Rosa and Isabella, smiling, laughing, together. The note rested beneath the picture. Naomi unfolded it slowly. The message was short. If this box is open, then our families found each other again. That means we succeeded. We were never trying to pass down money. We were trying to pass down belonging. The world will always teach people to measure worth by status, appearance, and success. Teach them something better. Teach them to remember. Naomi lowered the paper. Tears filled her eyes. Leonardo looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not the smile of a billionaire. Not the smile of a businessman. Just the smile of a son who had watched his mother find a lost piece of herself. Weeks later, Rosa's favorite part of every Tuesday became waiting for Naomi to visit. They spoke Italian, shared stories, sang old songs, and together they created a small foundation dedicated to preserving immigrant languages and family histories. On the day it launched, Leonardo asked Naomi why she thought all of this had happened. Naomi looked at the old photograph hanging on the wall and answered softly, "Because some promises are stronger than time." And in that moment, everyone finally understood that the most valuable things people leave behind are not possessions. They are the stories that help someone find their way home.